like recently there was martial law declared in Korea.
Yeah.
I've been to Korea a bunch of times recently.
Yeah.
I want to go to the DPRK. It's not easy to go. I would like to go and engage people there, talk to them, see what it's like. I've been going recently to a number of island nations in the Pacific.
Yeah, how's that?
There are 400 US military bases in the Pacific. There are 990 US military bases in the world. 400 of them are in the Pacific. Yeah. And they're all in these little islands. And the people of these islands are saying, we don't want you here anymore. That's what it's like. I mean, it's hard to describe. At the conference, we had this remarkable woman from a small island in Japan, 50,000 people. It's not that small, but it's small in comparison. Gorgeous, the Pacific laps onto the soil, beautiful beaches. And what are these islands? Radar stations, missile silos,
American military bases,
and the French have like nuclear test sites where they polluted the water. All of this has to go. We need more beautiful beaches for humans to not go and ruin, I'm not interested in that, but whatever, it's better. Look, tourism is better than a military base. I know tourism has its problems, but it's definitely better than a military base. Hawaii, I was in Hawaii recently. I was with these people from the sovereignty movement, giant US bases. They polluted the water thing. There's a place called Red Hill where the US was basically releasing fuel into the soil, polluted the water. US troops were getting cancer, not just the others, The Hawaiian sovereignty movement wants to remove the bases from Hawaii. Pearl Harbor will be gone. I went to Pearl Harbor. It's a bunch of rotting ships sitting in the harbor, with all their toxins polluting this beautiful, beautiful water. I love the beaches of the Pacific.
I have at least 10 Japanese friends tell me they have a theory. They're thinking there should be an urgent need to remove US bases because they believe they're releasing PFAS. It's firefighting more foam or solution to fight military-based fires. But that solution is anti-bow deposit, anti-light, anti-fire, anti-high, low temperature, anti-everything. So it's used to put out fire, but there's literally no way you can get rid of it.
Yeah.
And they're releasing that into water. It's already in underwater system. So their theory is the U.S. military is releasing PFAS into water system to eternally pollute the land. So even the locals want to protest and get rid of the military base. They will say, okay, this land is already impossible for civilians to use. They only use it for military base. So there's no way you can use it. Why not let us stay?
Wow. I followed a story from Okinawa where the population there didn't want the base to be expanded. So they did a very clever thing. Now, Okinawa is actually part of Japan. It's legally part of Japan, just to be clear. There's a US military base on it, which anyway is a reduction of your territorial sovereignty. But interesting, what this group did was they said, look, there's this kind of fish or dolphin called the dugong. And the dugong swims up into this one river. And so if the base is expanded, the dugong's habitat will be ruined. So what they did was they went to the US Congress, to the environmental whatever agency and some environmental congressional thing, and they made a complaint there. Now, again, just to repeat.
You mean the Okinawa people?
Yes,
went over there.
Okinawa is part of Japan.
Yeah.
But they took the case to the US Congress to say that the US base, if it is expanded, will hurt this dugong. And the US Congress said, yes, we should protect the dugong.
It's the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so the dugong...
It's a very sovereign nation.
Yeah.
We're going to spread this everywhere.
And the dugong, therefore, is firstly more important than the Okinawan people, A. And secondly...
Oh, yeah, you missed that point.
Yeah, you missed that part.
I missed that point.
Yeah, that's an
Brilliant.
important point.
Yeah.
And the second, of course, is, that the US has sovereignty over... It's one of my favorite stories of the absurdity of our world, okay? And Japan is a G7 country.
Yeah.
You know that, right?
Yeah.
Japan is like an important country, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'll be surprised. The U.S. has a theory of the island chains.
Yeah.
First island chain, second. This is a theory developed by John Foster Dulles in the 1950s. It's a very old theory, and they have built it up. I mean, Hawaii is an island. One of the island chains, and so on. And everywhere you go, there need not be a full-scale base. But in all these islands, whether it's Guam, American Samoa, there's like tons of military on all of them. And the US and French have done something clever. Like in New Caledonia, they basically gave people military jobs. So then the idea is if you remove the base, there's no work. But in New Caledonia this year, there was a massive protest led by the indigenous Kanak people. And the Kanak basically are saying, French go. It's an incredible process that's taking place because, in the Sahel region of Africa, from Senegal to Chad, they're all saying the French bases have to go. If France dégagez, France go away. But this is spreading now to New Caledonia. It was a huge protest movement of the Kanaks in New Caledonia. It's called the Kanak Independence League. But this is not just in New Caledonia. This feeling was there in Solomon Islands and other places. And I think it's going to spread to Guam, to Americans. The Americans are going to face, pressure. Even in northern Philippines, I have a feeling that soon people in Luzon are going to say, look, I don't want you to build an intermediate missile structure here because then we'll become a target in a war. I was in Australia recently. The US is expanding the runway at Darwin, Tyndall Air Base in the north of Australia. And the plan at Tyndall is for the US to house B-1 and B-52 bombers. These bombers are nuclear capable. And if they actually finish the expansion and they bring in B-1 and B-52s, they will be capable of flying and releasing payloads in China. Intermediate rockets could fire from Luzon directly into Shanghai. Minutes, undefensible. You can't defend against it. People in Darwin are going to say, I don't want this, because then there'll be retaliation. I mean, so there's going to be a turnaround. This whole build-up of war pressure on China, it's not about China and the US. People in Australia, people in Philippines, they are going to turn around and say, we don't want a part of this. I'm telling you this.
But the sentiment is one thing. Are they going to be able to execute it other than resorting to going to the environmental agency to say that let's protect the fish? Is the public sentiment going to actually mount to political will?
You can just take the example of what happened in Africa. That public sentiment was so great. The government had to be overthrown. And then the government had to say, okay, the French have to go. These are small island nations. Solomon Islands, a couple of years ago, was totally pro-American. And then there was a lot of pressure that we don't want to be a target in the middle of this war. And also, we would like to get involved in trading more with China. The government changed, they started trading with China. That was public sentiment. There were protests on the ground. So I'm not saying that, the Australian government will change tomorrow or the government in New Zealand. These are big countries. They are old, Five Eyes, they have lots of white settler consciousness. But some of the island nations in the Pacific, Polynesian protest movements are picking up. In New Zealand recently, the government tried to change the old treaty from 1840. There was a treaty in 1840 to settle the war between the Maori and the British settlers. That was in 1840. They were trying to revise the interpretation of the treaty. There was a mass protest, and you must have seen the viral of the 22-year-old elected official, Hannah, forgotten her last name. She stood up in the parliament.
That went viral in China too. Yeah.
But that's the revival of a new Polynesian radicalism that goes from, Polynesian culture goes from New Zealand to Hawaii to to Rapa Nui in Chile. It's a big triangle and all these islands in between. There's a real revival of sovereignty amongst the Polynesian people. It's going from Hawaii, it's all over the place. It's not going to disappear. You asked a correct question. Is public sentiment going to change things? I don't think we should say it one way or the other, because you never know in politics. Things can happen. And in small island nations, because the population is small, people are angry that they are in the middle of rising sea waters, nobody cares about them, COP dismisses their concerns, they are angry, they want their sovereignty. The key word nowadays is sovereignty. We don't want to be told what to do by somebody else.